Radio, a podcast produced by Winding Trails Media, for writers, by writers.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, president of St. Louis Writers Guild, president of Winding Trails Media that brings you this, and currently author of very crazy radio dramas I'm working on. And in November, I will be presenting at the St. Louis Public Library the weekend of Thanksgiving on story structure. They're doing a month-long NaNoWriMo month, and every Saturday they're having somebody come in and talk about something to do with writing. So my weekend is Thanksgiving weekend. Come check me out. And with me today is
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits, and apparently I write urban westerns too.
There you go.
So I'm happy to know that.
For urban western on top of...
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I am going to be doing a Poisons program. I'm going to reprise the Poisons program at
yay.
Romance Writers on October the 15th. That's a Saturday morning, and people can come there. It is at the Creve Coeur Rec Center on Old Cabin Road. Program at 11. Costs $5.
Perfect.
And also, I'm going to be at the Authors Expo in St. Charles County, and that is on November 17th. So come out and see me.
Excellent. I'm glad you're reprising the Poison one.
Yeah.
I missed the first one because of stuff that was going on, and I still wanted to see it. So yeah, you just made my day.
Sorry. Yeah, we had this conversation last time, so let's see, when is this airing again?
It's October 15th. It's still
Yeah,
before
okay,
the
it's still
magic
before.
day. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm still Melanie Kalani, author of science fiction, nonfiction, and fantasy. Yeah, you really need to listen to last week's show.
to answer why she said, it's still Melanie Kalani. On October 22nd, we're getting married, so she would be changing her name in certain ways. Anyway.
Yeah.
And also with us today is...
Yes, I'm Brad R. Cook, author of The Iron Chronicles, which is 3 amazing steampunk novels. Yes, I did just totally say that. The Iron Horseman, Iron Zulu, and coming this November, Iron Lotus. You can find me at the Foundry Arts Center at the end of October. You can find me at the local Author Expo as well. I will be there with you on November 17th.
Cool.
And then on November 26th, everybody here in the St. Louis area needs to come on out to Main Street Books for the start of Christmas traditions and Small Business Saturday and the launch of Iron Lotus. I'll be at Main Street Books, hanging out all day, selling books, and having a great time. We're going to steampunk the heck out of Main Street, so come on down.
Yeah, that should be perfect timing because a lot of people are dressed up in Dickens style.
Exactly. Everyone's dressed up. It's going to be the 1800s again in St. Charles. It's awesome.
Yes.
All you need now is a hot air balloon.
If I could, I would.
And today we're being joined by a special guest. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
My name is Rob Howell. I am the author of 3 novels in my fantasy world. The world is called Shijuren, Shijuren, which you can find on Amazon by typing that in, and you'll see all of my novels there. I'm here in part because 2 of the novels I've written in one of the series in that world is essentially a hard-boiled detective novel or series, and it's just with swords instead of 38 specials and that sort of a thing. So
Nothing wrong with that.
nothing wrong with that.
I prefer swords over guns anyway.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
So uncivilized.
Yes, and before we get started on our talk today, which is going to be... Oh, sorry.
I was just forgot to mention my next appearance after the show is going to be at World Fantasy Con in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm really excited to go there and participate in the panels with some fantastic authors.
Nice.
Fantastic. Yes, today's talk is... I'm sorry, my mind just did an Evel Knievel, but fell right down into the pit. Today's talk is going to be what makes good noir, what makes good thrillers. This was a episode requested, or at least part of it was requested by a fan. So if you have any questions for us in the future, or you have topics that you'd like us to discuss, please either Twitter to us, or sorry, I should say tweet to us. Tweet to us, or post a comment on Facebook. Let us know, because this is what happens. And before we get started, though, I do want to do two special call-outs of thanks. By the time this airs, we will have gone through both events. One was PandaCon, which just happened the weekend we are recording this, and that allows St. Louis Writers Guild to come out, have a table, and allow me to talk about villains and how to create the layered villain, or the necessary villain. And FYI, Winding Trails Media will have that out, knock on wood, in November as a webinar, so watch for it. Also, too, by the time this airs, we would have completely gone through Archon. And once again, it was St. Louis Writers Guild, but this time a lot of presenters were also members of the Right Pack. In fact, we almost invaded Archon. So I want to say thank you to them as well for having us out and having all our talks, which were extremely numerous. I'm looking at Brad thinking, what, five talks? I've only got two, but wow. So
yeah, one on Friday, 3 on Saturday, and 1 on Sunday.
Yeah, we got to talk about fight scenes. I know.
Yep.
One night we got to cross blades. Well, this is a weird thing. Recording for the future. We don't know what happened yet. So anyway,
we'll have blades, but I don't think we get to kill each other this time.
But
Darn.
The waitresses at the bar that I do a lot of my writing have gotten used to me choreographing fight scenes because I'll sit in my chair and I'll be moving where the swords are going to strike or where the blows are going to come in, and blocks and footwork and all that stuff, and I'm doing it, and the waitresses are just like, oh, he's writing, and the people next to me, some business crowd lunch, thing is like, who's the weirdo?
Yeah, I've got a few looks like that. Okay, so today, noir and thrillers. Let's talk first off. They share a lot of things in between them, but they're not identical genres.
I was going to say, they're very different.
They're very different genres, but that crossover kind of helps. So what makes a good noir, or what is noir? And by the way, I did find a couple of articles. I really hate how Huffington Post claimed it. Here's Huffington Post, I'm sorry. This is their title, I can get over there. Noir fiction is about losers, not private eyes.
Okay.
Raymond Chandler would have a fit if he saw that.
And I would pay and bring the popcorn to watch.
Yes.
I'd actually like to see that letter to the Huffington Post.
I'll be happy to send it to you after we're done. Is it?
No. The letter
Oh,
Raymond
Chandler.
Chandler writing to the Huffington Post.
Yes.
Because he wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't come out. He'd just write something beautiful and submit it, and they would, of course, publish it, and we'd all read it.
Yeah. And this was posted, back on August in 2010. So, they probably forgotten all about their little blow up here.
The Huffington Post does a whole lot of editorials. I have no idea who comes up with their headlines, but they're not the people that write the articles. So you might want to only be mad at the author of the article if you disagree with the article. Don't pay attention to the headline.
No. The article has in the second paragraph, first sentence, look, noir is about losers.
Okay, you can be mad at the author.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm set.
Well, let's say what noir really is,
Please.
which comes from darkness. I think is a good way of putting that.
There are two definitions of noir.
Okay.
I don't mean the color part. There is noir film, which actually lends its name to what Brad's about to talk about, and then there's noir fiction. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you tend to have the grizzled, detective, thinking of like the Maltese Falcon and everything like that. But yeah, so they tend to be darker. They tend to have a bit more of a somber tone, so to speak.
Well, they've lived.
Yeah.
They have lived through a lot, and it has roughed them up and made them perhaps less simpatico than most people would want to have around that house.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I will say that it's usually about a flawed character. They aren't necessarily losers, but they usually have serious problems.
Yeah. They're broken, they're jagged, they're etc.
And they may or may not have a drinking problem.
Yes.
Well, it's only a problem, like an airplane when
Exactly.
But no, I did a lot of research on this when we started talking about this, because while my novels are hard-boiled detective and very noir, and like my first reviewer said, Raymond Chandler in the Tolkien world, I wasn't. That sort of happened organically because I was reading it, so I didn't have a technical definition. And what I found from what my research was is that there's not a real good technical definition. There are a lot of things that people think should be in a noir, either film or fiction, but none of these things are required in every one of them. And sometimes the good guy, one definition I saw was very fascinating, and I don't know where they came up with this, but it was that the hero in a noir shouldn't be a police officer or a private detective. That's hard-boiled detective fiction, which is separate, and I found that different, an odd definition, and I don't agree with it. But I think the whole thing is there's so many aspects, and we all sort of have a feel to it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that it really boils down to an atmosphere that you're creating, a mood that you're creating. Right. Obviously there will be fog.
At night.
Exactly, at night, I don't think Noir is riding around on a bright sunny day in a convertible.
Exactly.
But, I think a lot of times, as you were saying, we have this notion of what should be a noir. And I think that comes from having, just so much thrown at us over the years. As I mentioned, the Maltese Falcon, but I would also throw in something like Blade Runner, as being noir. So it really does span this huge field of movies and books, and that's why I say I think it's a mood and an atmosphere more than a specific thing.
I would totally agree. And I would say it doesn't have to have private detectives, but the reason why private detectives are seen in noir, and yes, okay, you could say that's a hard-boiled. Guess what? A lot of hard-boiled is noir. So the reason for that is you're looking at the layers of humanity and a society in which a lot of times people don't really want to experience in their own lives. You've got money, you got the money problems, the greed that comes with it, the sex aspects, the racist aspects, and so forth. One of the great hard-boiled detectives that I would throw in there as noir is the Easy Rawlins series. Is a fantastic series that demonstrates 1950s upward on racism and what black people could do and not do, and it's aimed at that time period, but it's just that grit that gets in there. Go ahead.
I think if there is one tenet, one frame that really goes across all of noir, it's this: that the heroes or anti-heroes, if you'd rather call them that, want something that they will never, ever be able to have. They want the girl and the money. And they're not going to get either, probably, but at most they'll get one. Take, for example, one of the great noir films of all time, Double Indemnity. Barbara Stanwyck, Fred McMurray. Well, that's what they want. He wants the girl and the money. And of course, what happens is he gets neither. And instead is doomed. And so the characters, I think that is one of the key facets of noir, that the characters want something most terribly. And we know probably from the outset that no matter how hard they try, how much they sacrifice, they will simply never get it.
Exactly. Go ahead, and I've got something to say.
I was just going to say that I think one of the features of noir that's important is a sort of cynical, real look at society. You brought up the racism in that, and I think one of I'm a former historian, and so when I look at these things, and I'm reading, for example, Raymond Chandler, and he's writing in the 30s, I'm seeing a wonderful sample, an example of what society was at that point in time, with all of its flaws, with the good things, the pulling out of the depression, and all of the things going on. much better than many other things. A lot of times Mice and Men gets tossed out as a good example of that time period. And yet, I read The Big Sleep or something like that, and I think I see an even better example of
Yes.
broader
I completely
selection
agree.
society.
Noir really does kind of encapsulate that era beautifully.
And I think also, too, it looks at that era as well as modern day era and any era that's being written about the sense of justice back then, or sense of justice even today. I'm not quoting actually from a noir novel, but I think it fits the definition, and I'm going to explain a little bit with noir. The quote is, this is a court of law, not of justice. And if you look at a lot of noir books, movies, TV shows, justice is very raw, and somebody can get out of it in law, and as far as the law is concerned, but the hero may end up killing, or there might be some type of sense of justice that happens to the bad guy in the end. Let me use the example of a remake of Shaft with Samuel L. Jackson. He quits being a cop and to be kind of a protector of the people, but in the story there is a white guy played by
Christian Bale.
Thank you. I get him and another name mixed up. I know it's not the right name. And he beats this black guy senseless. He kills him, basically. And he's about to get off. And in the end, the court gets him off of the charges. But the mother of the son ends up shooting the guy dead right in front of the press and everything else. And it's really like, yes, justice was served, but now she's off to the end of justice, so I say.
Classic technique.
Yep.
So I was going to flip over to thriller real quick.
Okay.
The depth of thriller. And basically I would say that thriller contrasts to noir in the sense of pace and in the sense of excitement. A noir can be, as we mentioned, somber. It can be kind of a low beat book.
But it's very tense.
It's
there's
very
a lot
tense.
of
Yeah,
suspense.
there's a lot of tense and a lot of
It's just
suspense.
bubbling under the surface.
Exactly. Whereas I think in a thriller, you let it kind of bubble over and start.
And it becomes a chase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's obviously going to be a chase. There'll be a chase. There'll be a ticking clock, so to speak. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
There will be something that, and thrillers tend to have that quick beat, whereas I think noirs have kind of a slower beat.
Yeah, noirs definitely have a slower beat. The thrill that comes with the thriller does have a faster beat, and it should read a lot faster than a noir. But you just brought this up. I'm going to let you go, if you will.
No.
Then I'm going to pull up the question that was by our listener. But come on, internet, move please. Ever since Windows 10 updated, I have had a slowdown here.
Well, then I'll just go ahead and say what I was going to add about the protagonist. I believe it was Raymond Chandler, it might have been Dashiell Hammett, it was one of the two, said something to the effect of the main hero in their style of novels had to be someone who was always out for justice, completely focused on justice, no matter what everybody else thought about him. In the Maltese Falcon is the perfect sort of
Yes.
viewpoint of that. At the end, he has the chance to keep the girl, but she's killed his partner, and so he gives her up and gives up the money
Because
for
he
the
has to do the right thing.
because he has to do the right thing, and the right thing may not be the legal thing because of the way the law is written, but he has his own code of what justice has to be and always has to live up to it.
And sometimes that code is very, very, I used the word raw before, but I'm going to use an example, and this is not a character from a noir film or noir TV show or noir story, but yet the character was written as if he was. This is a Michael Garibaldi from Babylon 5, and the actual actor said this too, which is why it got turned into a line, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't exactly remember the exact wording, but he was along the lines of there should not be electric chairs, there should be electric benches. So you just mass take care of it. And that's a very rough sense of justice that the legal system definitely would not agree with.
Sure.
And that's sometimes what you see. Here's a question from Amy Starch. If I'm mispronouncing your name, please forgive me, Amy. But I agree with I love your question, and that is, what are some of the tricks for adding suspense and danger without going down the James Bond path? Because it is the first place I tend to go. Not every story needs bombs and car chases. Now, I agree, you don't need to have bombs, you don't need to have car chases. A chase is very suspenseful, but you can put it on foot. Let me use an example.
Well, chase is a chase, no matter how you do it. But you don't necessarily need a chase to impart that quick pace of a thriller.
Right.
I was just going to say that chases are useful, and they do add a pace to it because of we've clearly got a time thing going on. But I think any novel should have a bit of a racing, an increasingly fast pace as you go along. And I love her question, because it's true that if we, especially as someone who's writing a serial, novel after novel after novel, I've got to be very careful that I don't make every challenge, the huge explodey thing that I then have to top the next time or go a completely different route. And I think there are a lot of things we can add that can do those sorts of things.
I agree. There's various, just like mystery and noir, there's various different types of them. There's various types of thrillers as well. If you have a techno thriller, you have a spy thriller, you've got the psychological thriller, so on and so forth. But I wrote a series of blogs a long time ago called Writing Hitchcockian. And you can find it on The Writer's Lens, which is The Writer's Lens, one word.
TheWritersLens.com.
Thank you. And just type in Writing Hitchcockian. And one of the things Hitchcock used, and I consider him a master of suspense, as most people do, he used Freudian psychology. Now, you don't have to use Freud, but using psychology to create the suspense. That's why chases are suspenseful. You have a psychological aspect to it. But one of the ways to do the psychology is, and I'm using Freud because of the way Hitchcock did, you have 3 story worlds in a story of thriller, and as well as you do in noir, in my opinion. You have you have a world of the id, which is what do I want, what do I want, what do I want, what do I want. You have a story of his superego, which is, no, you can't have that, this world is restricted, and you have a world of the ego itself. So basically what I'm telling you is you've got the world of desire, I'm reading from my own notes, the world of desire, the world of the mind, and the world of reality. And it's those 3 crossing each other constantly that creates a level of suspense in itself. Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the ways you can do this without having the actual car chase or the bomb that's about to blow up, but both of those things impart a sense of time. There is time ticking down. And that can happen in multiple ways. That can be that there is something, a set date, and we're working towards that date.
24 did it great with a 24-hour
exactly.
concept.
But it's that notion of time. The time is slipping away, that there's not a lot of it. That's what quickens the pace of your novel. That's what it makes the beat of our heart go just a little bit faster, is that notion that time is running out. And yes, you can do that with a car chase, where we're speeding through a city and we're trying to do that. You can do it with a bomb where there's actually a ticking clock that's going down and will hit 0. But imparting that sense of there is something urgent that must be taken care of. You were talking about the cyber, kind of thriller as being, a new thriller genre that we have. That could be something as much as there's a virus that's about to be released, which is kind of like a bomb. Or it can be that I have, X amount of time in order to be able to release the documents and get them out there to the world. That any kind of notion that you can add time to is one of the ways you can avoid having a bomb.
Right. I'm going to come back to that second. Go ahead, Fedora, then.
I think one of the very best ways, I'm stuck today on double indemnity, is sexual tension.
Yes.
If you want to know about sexy dialogue, just watch that movie and see Fred MacMurray and Barbara Stanwyck as they talk about time and going too fast. And it's all about sex, but not on the surface. The words are completely different. And sexual tension you'll find cropping up, I think, in most thrillers in one fashion or another.
Yes.
As there is some kind of sex interest, even if it's a very puerile kind, such as in Star Wars, when it's cartoonish almost. They're just kind of silly trading barbs here and there. But there is still sexual tension. Maybe not very much of it, and maybe not very sexy, but it's there. And the more you make of it, the better you can have the suspense because you've raised the stakes.
And what you're talking about there is perfect in the world of desire versus the world of reality. What's allowed versus what the character wants. Go ahead, and I'm going to come back with something else.
Okay, I think all of this hinges upon creating fear or worry at some level. But one of the it's not a good thing in the sense of real life, but one of the good things about fear is that it's contagious. So you don't necessarily have to have something huge happen to your protagonist.
No.
He just has to be close friends to somebody who has something that terrifies or frightens the client, for lack of a better term, in a detective novel or something like that. And it could be something simple. Hey, I started my second novel off by, my little girl has lost her doll. Can you go find it for me? Well, it doesn't seem like that's the way a thriller should start, except it turned out to be exactly the way that worked out for when I was writing that. So you just have to find something around the protagonist that causes enough fear for the protagonist to have some concern, and then transmit to the audience, in my mind.
And one of the things to do, but when we went into the fear place, you don't have to have a car chase. You can have the elements of fear that a human being would have. Maybe you yourself as an author. I'm going to toss out a couple of Alfred Hitchcock movies, and one of which I would argue substantially being both a thriller and a noir. And that one is Vertigo. Vertigo is a story. Jimmy Stewart's the hero of the story. He is a detective. I think he was a detective at first, but he was definitely a cop. He's chasing some bad guys across a rooftop, and there's a slip, an accident, and he is hanging on by the threads, and another cop falls to his death. And this causes what we today would call PTSD moment to him. He is now retired. He gets more or less hired by a friend to watch over his wife, who is supposedly going down the Looney Tunes aspect. And this is all a setup. But, which I know I'm spoiler alert, but hey, this was filmed back in 50s, 60s? By now you should know it. But anyway, it turns out that his friend had already killed his own wife, and was using this woman as a decoy, and Jimmy Stewart finds a woman after the death of a wife, quote unquote. But the whole entire time is his entire fear of vertical, of heights, prevents him from doing things. And he's trying to overcome that throughout the entire movie. Good example. Another one, Suspicion. In Suspicion, I think it's Cary Grant, is technically a bad guy slash good guy, and he's driving his wife somewhere. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but they're driving on a very narrow road, but the other side is a sheer drop cliff. Once again, using the fear of heights. And when they're going to go over, I have a fear of heights myself. It's something I developed when I was 10 years old. But so my last one's going to be To Catch a Thief. Once again, using height as a big issue. And there is kind of sort of a car chase, both in the book and the movie, To Catch a Thief, but mostly it's all done on foot, as far as any kind of chases or that's concerned. You don't need to have it. Go ahead if you need to.
The other one I was going to mention is raising the stakes. I mean, that's
Yes.
one of the things we talked about. We've talked about on previous episodes. But anytime you can raise the stakes for your characters, that's going to impart that sense of urgency, and that's going to create that thrilling, beat within the person where you're speeding it up. And yes, that can be death, but it can be a lot less than that, and still have that, thrilling quality to it. It's just that quality of, or the notion of raising those stakes, and then raising them again, and then raising them again.
And I just said I'm going to come to you now, but perfect example, once again, Alfred Hitchcock. And by the way, the TV cartoon Clone Wars stole from Alfred Hitchcock on this one, and that is the movie Notorious, which a woman who was a daughter of a Nazi after World War II is used to infiltrate a neo-Nazi group she marries the bad guy at being acting undercover, and she's starting to get poisoned. And watch the movie, but if you watch the movie, you'll see how she gets rescued by the good guys, and it's exactly the same as when Padme gets poisoned in the show Clone Wars. And it was, I'm sitting there laughing as I'm watching, going, yeah, I know exactly where it's from. You and then you.
All right, so playing on the ratcheting up of tension with raising the stakes, I think one of the best ways for me, and at least in these novels that I'm writing with this main protagonist, again following the idea that the protagonist in these has to have this sense of justice, is that I keep trying to put him in situations where he is likely, or where he's struggling to be able to keep his word, to keep his, to follow up on the things he says he'll do, and to protect the people that he has sworn to protect. And in his mind, that's how he thinks of what are becoming his clients in my world. So as the challenges get more and more for him to keep that, I'm ratcheting up the tension.
Exactly.
I think one of the key tools that a writer has is the use of deception. Take, for example, the Maltese Falcon. She, Shaughnessy or whatever, she doesn't even tell anybody what her name is.
Yep.
And she certainly romances Sam Spade, but we never know whether that's sincere or not, and I don't suppose that he does either. There is plenty of deception there, and that is certainly a way that you can make either suspense or noir not have all of the actual violence that is so often common, and so often I think takes the place of real thinking, if you'll pardon my saying so. But deception, I think, is very important. Take another James M. Cain that I love, which is The Postman Always Rings Twice. In that, this couple hides and runs around deceiving her old man, and he's a perfectly nice guy, I mean, except that they want to kill him. So deception is a very key point in noir especially, but I think it can be in suspense as well.
Totally agree.
I don't know if Casablanca is totally classified as noir, but the deception, and really there's not that much violence in Casablanca, and yet there's so much tension. I mean, there's a little bit, especially the shooting at the end of the Nazi officer, but there's so much deception going on.
And concealment.
And concealment.
There.
And again, we have the hero who says, well, the just way is for her to him not to get the girl, and for her to go off with her husband. And we don't know any of that's happening in his mind until he turns the tables on everybody.
Totally agree. So, is noir just thriller? The answer is no. What's the big difference between them? Do you think?
Well, we mentioned the pace of them. You know, like I'm looking at a bunch of different modern thrillers here, and every one of them is kind of rapid fire. You know, like the Da Vinci Code or Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. They all have a really quick, you know, you're either running, you're chasing, somebody's trying to shoot you, somebody's trying to kill you, somebody's, you know, trying to get you.
It's like Mickey Spillane come back to
Yeah, you know, like there is a really fast
I
beat that, you know, you can almost hear the drum beat for each one of these books. Whereas I think, you know, with the Maltese Falcon, which I just watched, so I keep coming back to it.
It's a classic.
Yeah, it's one of the great movies.
Books and movies.
But it has a kind of, you know, slow, bubbling pace that's kind of moving along, and there's a lot of tension and a lot of suspense and a lot of deception and a lot of you don't really know what's going on. Even in the end, when they tell you everything that's going on, you're still not 100% certain what's going on.
Right.
So, you know, I think that's really the difference. If you look at Blade Runner, that does have the shootings and the car chases and everything like that, those are moments, you know, where he's like chasing, you know, Snake Lady through the glass and stuff like that. You know, those are moments in the movie, but at the same time, there's also, you know, him asking the questions to Sean Young, and, you know, having that kind of moment, or where they talk about the kind of dreamy place, you know, and everything that goes for it. It goes towards that, or when Pris is with the toy maker. These are all low moments that could be boring in a thriller, but because you've got those layers of deception, because you've got that layer of tension, the sexual natures that kind of go into that, the sexual tensions that are pulled along.
Yes.
Those are really exciting scenes. Those are scenes that you want to watch again and again.
It's a gross oversimplification, but I might say that the difference between noir and thriller is mental excitement versus physical excitement.
Yeah.
In the thrillers, you're expecting to have some adrenaline.
Yeah.
While you can have adrenaline-filled scenes in noir, the key thing that we're talking about, get back to, is the deception or the sexual tension and wandering around the outsides mentally as opposed to going directly into it.
There is a puzzle to solve,
Absolutely.
which there may not, or may not be in thrillers.
I think in noir also you have to talk to yourself. Whereas in the thriller you don't.
Have a voiceover?
Yeah, but in every noir it seems like you've got to talk to yourself and have that inner monologue.
I was walking down the roads of St. Louis. The blood had been wiped off the street by the pouring rain.
Okay, sorry. I had to do a little voiceover there.
Apparently his inner monologue is quite dark.
I do. I write dark. You know that. Go ahead.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when I was writing my first novel, Lake Most Deep, I got about 20,000 words into it, and I originally started to write an epic fantasy. And as I got to about 20,000 words, what I had been reading on the side was rereading a lot of the Robert B. Parker Spencer novels and the Raymond Chandler and the Dashiell Hammett, and I realized at that point that what I had written was a noir detective start to a novel, and I went back, switched it from third person to first person, because I think as you just said, that I need to see the main character's thoughts in that noir, and so those novels are all first person except for the occasional side prologue, or if I have a set aside scene or something like that. But I went back just to change exactly for that reason.
I was mentioning, so I'm jumping back a little bit. Great, a couple of chase scenes that are different, and then also something that Alfred Hitchcock used in one of his movies. Actually, I've been to two of them. Two of my favorites, I just completely forgot until I looked at my notes. Other ways to handle this suspense. Ultimate chase scene, North by Northwest. If you haven't seen it, please watch these movies. I mean, seriously, if you are interested in understanding thrillers, why haven't you watched Alfred Hitchcock? Yes, he's old and out of date technically, but seriously, people. In North by Northwest, the main character, which is played by Cary Grant, is in the middle of absolutely nowhere. There's cornfields around, or wheat fields. I think they're actually wheat fields, if I remember right. And he's supposed to meet somebody there, and suddenly, when this other person doesn't show up, a biplane, which is dusting the crops, starts chasing after him. And it's just an interesting and very frightful chase scene. But there's even better suspense, in which humor is used. Yes, you can have humor with your thrillers. And that is, if anybody remembers, the auction scene. Does anybody else remember the auction? I got Fedora nodding her head up and down. And basically, Cary Grant's character is caught in this auction, and he went there on purpose, but he doesn't realize that here's the bad guys here, the bad guys there, and they're closing off around him, and he's got to get out of this somehow. So he starts bidding for something. I don't remember what, and it doesn't matter what it was anymore. But we'll say some very, very expensive piece. People are bidding thousands of dollars on it, and he finally bids, and he goes, $5. And the auctioneer goes, oh, $5,000. No, $5. Now that wasn't the exact amount, but you get the idea. And he creates a scene that causes the cops to pull him out as if to arrest him, and that's how he gets out of it. Watch it. Another one. This is my first exposure to Alfred Hitchcock, was Rear Window. And in the end, the bad guy is. By the way, let me set the scene. Jimmy Stewart has a broken leg. He is stuck in his house. He can't leave. And he's been peeping Tom the entire movie. And it's a great view of how we are always looking into society through our own windows, if you will, into other people's worlds. But he witnesses a murder. He doesn't actually witness the act, but he puts things together and goes, oh my God, this person's killed off his wife. And the guy figures out who Jimmy Stewart is and comes to kill him. Jimmy Stewart doesn't have a gun. There is no gunfight here. But he's got to have enough time to get the cops there to stop this killer from killing him. So back in the day, they used to have flash bulbs for their cameras, and he used the flash to slow the guy down in complete darkness. And I'm going to just leave it there. Watch the movie. Go ahead.
I was going to mention Rear Window too, so we're thinking
Yeah.
alike
It's
here.
one of my favorites.
But what I was going to say was that another tool that the writer has, I think, is curiosity.
Yes.
To keep piquing the curiosity of the reader or the viewer, like happens and is the whole substance really of Rear Window, because he's using his field glasses to spy on his neighbor
Yeah.
and discovers that the guy killed his wife, or at least he thinks he did.
Yeah.
And had he not been curious and spying on his neighbor, he would never have discovered that. And Raymond Burr would have got away with it.
Exactly. And before I turn it over to you, that's something else too that's handled in Noir, is the detective, despite everything he or she has been through, it still remains curious and wants to solve that puzzle.
I was also going to say that leads me to, that curiosity also leads me to the senses of humor and how important that can be to these sorts of things. I was actually in a conversation today, I was talking to a nurse friend of mine, because I wanted to have kind of a realistic timetable for a stabbing, how long it would take for it to heal, because I started my third novel the day after the second one ends, and he's been wounded in the final scenes and all of these things. And one of the things that we brought up is her appreciation for the grim senses of humor of capable military people and medical people who see such grim things routinely, and they have to laugh through it. Otherwise, they're either not paying attention at all, which is clearly bad, or they get to like it too much, which is terrifying in its own right.
Or they're too sympathetic.
Somewhere along the lines is that
So
they
can't
have
stand to do the job.
exactly. You have to laugh at these things. So as we're talking about in these tense situations, we really have to add a little bit of humor. And going to Firefly, that's a perfect example of all of those wonderful one-liners that Nathan Fillion and all of them toss off in the middle of battles, makes those scenes even more tense, because you can kind of see, yes, they're funny one-liners, but
It's the gallows humor of that one line.
yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I mean, beyond the darkness that, they have to confront and have to deal with on a daily basis and need to find levity in, we all use it as a coping mechanism.
Yes.
I don't know of a single person who doesn't use humor as a coping mechanism. I mean, this is why we have comedians. So humor is a wonderful thing. We could probably go through almost every noir or thriller that we have talked about today and find moments of humor, because they're there, intended or not.
You got me stuck here on Alfred Hitchcock. Strangers on
great
a
place to be.
Train. Strangers on a Train.
Yes.
This one bases a lot of its excitement around pure confusion, because while these guys had this real cerebral conversation on the train about trading murders, something actually happens, and then what the heck am I going to do? Am I supposed to kill this guy? Oh no, what do? Do I turn him in? They'll think I'm a killer. How do you proceed with such confusion? And I think that is a good technique to, once again, avoid the chase if that's what you're trying to do.
Well, I think also, just to throw this out, we keep talking about Hitchcock, but as we keep talking about all these different movies, I keep thinking of a dozen other movies that have stolen from Hitchcock.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Be a remakes or redos.
Exactly.
For that matter, Kevin Smith
Oh, my.
actually says that he's stolen a number of things from Hitchcock in his silly movies. There,
Exactly. So, as we say this, go watch all the Hitchcock movies and then just write your book. Write your thriller, write your noir.
You could do worse.
Exactly.
No, and actually, in all honesty with that, there are some good books out there that not tear apart, but dissect Hitchcock's artistic style. And I would highly recommend that you start looking into some of those books and see how it can be done. Because I agree with our fan who asked the question. It's easy to fall into James Bondian type suspense. I've done it. I don't know any thriller writer who hasn't done it, or a mystery writer who hasn't done it, at least to some degree. But that trope becomes overly done, overly boring, and you gotta get away from it sometimes. And there are other avenues. It's a matter of finding them. And Hitchcock's movies and all those mystery stories that he lent his name to, they have those elements in them.
Well, one of the things that I do to follow up on something Brad said was I write in a lot of different genres for a number of things, other things I do, and one of those is a variety of different medieval poetic styles. And the way I write those is that if I know I want to write something in say, a Norse Strodkveit, which is a very complicated style, or a sonnet or something like that, I wallow in that poetry for a while. I wallow in that style, and I let the word choices and the cadences and the rhythms that are sort of inherent in the words flow into me, so that when I then write them, and that's exactly what happened, as I was saying, I realized I was writing a noir, a hard-boiled detective, and I've been wallowing in that, and it shines through. So if you're wanting a feel for, as a writer, wallow in the style that you want. It's not thievery, it's just sort of getting yourself in the correct mood to properly put out the voice.
I would say a word about the level of competence of your narrator in a noir novel. I think that you expect that character to have a fair degree of confidence in his ability to accomplish something. He's a private detective, he's a cop, he's whatever. But in Alfred Hitchcock, what you get often is a poor schmuck who doesn't know what's going on.
Yes.
It's Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
It's somebody who has no idea what's going on, and that's why we can have lots and lots of sympathy for them.
Well, Hitchcock's one of his big themes was the wrong man. It's the wrong man that the bad guys are after. It's the wrong man the cops are after. It's that level of confusion that ends up creating a situation for that person to be in suspense. Imagine you had yours up.
No, I'm good.
Okay, back to you then.
I was going to follow up on what Fedora just said. I think that's a really important point to remember, is that you've got to scale the conflict in such a way that your protagonists, for lack of a better term, I'm going to use the D&D level system just so that it's a concrete description, but you need to start the challenge at a higher level than your characters start with, so that by the end the characters can learn and grow enough, because you're supposed to have your characters grow in literature, right? So at the end of it, they need to be high enough level to have defeated whatever the bad guy or the situation is, but they can't be able to do it at the start. They have to grow to that. And so wherever you start your character at is where your bad guy has to scale to.
I had a question. This goes off a side topic, which is why I've been waiting to make it, or a question. We've been talking about classic noir. Well, what about noir in basically crossover noir, combining it with other genres? And I'm just like our guest does, but also I just wanted people's opinions, and a couple of my panelists, if not most, 3 out of 4 other people here might know this. Would you consider Harry Dresden of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher to be noir? Yes or no? And please tell me why.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Universal. Yes. Tell me why.
Well, I think we get back to the mental side of things. I love the Dresden books, and Butcher and I have a lot of the same influences. We both, one of our big influences is the Lord Darcy series from Randall Garrett, which if you probably never heard of it, but it's sort of a Sherlock Holmes meets magic, and there's an alternate time, and it's just a fantastic collection of stuff. Randall Garrett, one of the best authors you've never heard of, most likely, but and all of these things that he pulls from, he's pulling mental stories. It's not so much action that I think drives Harry Dresden. It's his ability to puzzle things out, and there are action scenes, but it's his mind that's the key.
I completely agree with all of that. And I think the other thing that I would throw out is that, as we were mentioning about noir is a mood, it's a feeling, and the Dresden novels have that.
Yes.
Bob.
They're in spades. So, but yeah, and I agree completely, because there is action, there is excitement, there is almost thriller components, but that's not the heart of the story. The heart of the story is kind of a hard-boiled magic detective.
A crossover to give the other sort of end of the spectrum of sort of a modern monster-filled thing is Larry Correa's Monster Hunters thing, which is almost all explosions and gunfire and all of these sorts of things, and it has some of the puzzle things, but the puzzle things the mental side of things is nowhere near as important as the adrenaline-filled fight scenes in that, and so both have many of the same elements of monsters and magicians in today's world, but different ways of looking at it.
Well, I agree. It's partly a matter of balance, but also I think we have to be careful not to go clear way over into the horror genre and call that just plain suspense, because really I think it is over the line and into horror for its own rather spectacularly red shape.
Yeah, and there's a difference between horror and suspense, and horror and noir. I mean, the outcome of results in horror, there should not be a happy ending. Let's put it that way. Where in noir, I always said horror there. So let me make sure I reset it. In horror, there should not be a happy ending. Or if there is, there's an undertone to this. It's not going to be happy tomorrow.
So like maybe the hero can survive, but everybody else died?
There's that, but the hero's going to be stalked even after they survived.
Sequel.
If there's going to be a sequel, or at least there's going to be a sequel mentally. In noir, you may not get legal justice, as I talked about earlier, but you get a sense of justice that has happened. In suspense, it's a little more iffy on that, but there's a sense that situation is now
the good guy
done.
usually wins in the end of
The good guy usually wins at the end of suspense.
I think you were first.
Yeah. So I was going to throw out that for noir, the difference between noir and horror, and there are many, but I think in horror, the point is to scare you.
Mm-hmm.
The point is to have that moment where the music goes, and there's like a ghost that pops up on the screen or something like that, and whatever's happening around that. I mean, everyone loves I can't think of the name of them right now, but there's like 6 or 7 of them, and all it is you're watching somebody else's movie, play out. You're seeing the time code go.
Oh, you're talking about Paranormal Activity.
Yes, Paranormal Activity. I do not find these movies scary at all. I sit there and I literally just watch the screen for 5 minutes and the chair moves. That does not frighten me.
Right.
But that's the entire point of it. That's not a thriller. That's not a suspense. That's not, a noir. However, I would throw out Frank Miller and his Sin City series
Almost certainly noir.
as being noir. Very, very, very noir. Very bloody, very graphic,
It's
very
very
violent.
black for sure.
Yes.
Very black and white.
And it has car chases, it's got the explosions, it's got the gunfights and stuff like that. But it very much has a noir feel and theme and mood to the whole, movies and the comic books.
Agreed.
So you brought up the whole horror thing, and one of the things that is crossing my mind on all of this, I liked very little horror, but the Vincent Price, Christopher Lee style of horror of the 40s and 50s and 60s was very suspenseful and all that sort of thing. There's a lot of noir in those, because again, we get back to the mental pacing of sort of attacking your brain throughout the entirety of it, and the bloodshed is not there. It's fear, constant drops of fear that they're adding.
It's going back to that notion of bringing out the fear and making you afraid, and using fear as, kind of something to unsettle the reader or the watcher, the viewer.
Because if there's no tension, there's no
Exactly.
story.
Right.
And fear is, I think, at the heart of tension in many ways, right? I mean, can we have tension without fear? Maybe not on a terrified level, but I'm a little tense about where I park my car. If
That
it's
unease, that
you know.
uneasy feeling inside you is
Yeah.
what creates that tension. No,
Well, I think
agree.
it's a continuum between fear and desire.
Yes.
You want to take it both ways. Either way will give you suspense.
Mm.
Totally true. So, as we come to a close here, pretty quickly, what elements, even if you don't write noir or you don't write suspense or thriller, do you try to incorporate in your stories?
Well, I'll start here. I don't write noir. I have tried, and I've gone down that road, sort of, but my novels, the Iron Chronicles, are, as I like to kind of chronicle them, as they're adventure novels, which kind of throws them a little bit into the thriller category. As I'm looking over some of these thrillers, I do have that quick beat. I like the fast pace. I like, I don't know if I ever had a car chase. I had carriage chases, yes, I did have carriage chases. So yeah, that is there. But I have airship chases, and in Lotus there's a very much of a sense of, in certain places where time is definitely running out. So if I've done anything, I've stepped into the thriller genre just a bit. Even though I do play with inner monologue and all that kind of fun stuff. So, but I have to admit, I don't really use that somber tone of the noir. However, the short story that created the Iron Chronicles, which is about Genevieve, the Baroness's character, as an older person, I de-aged her for the books. That is actually very much more noir in style. Because it's set in foggy London and has that kind of darker tone to it all. So, I should say, as a steampunk author, I've dipped into these other genres. But at the core, I do write an adventure novel, so I'm probably more on that thriller side.
You write mystery, which goes
Right.
into noir.
But it's not noir, except I would say that backstory that sometimes comes out is pretty dark, but very brief, so I don't think it is overwhelming in any sense. However, I will also say this.
What
I
about
don't,
Jack the Ripper?
well, yeah, but that's backstory once again.
Yeah. Okay.
That's not really noir, it's more of a cozy than noir, actually.
Yes.
But I do have a critique partner, Claire Applewhite, who writes nom noir.
Yep.
Okay. And so I read a fair amount of it. And what I find characterizes what she does is that she has a kind of a broken hero, post-traumatic distress victim, and the woman who tries to love him but has a difficult time with that. And I think those are things that work very well for her noir series. And then, of course, they're detectives, so they get involved in all kinds of cunning junk.
Eric, Rob, we know that you definitely write noir, at least noir style.
Well, you say that, and I don't know. I certainly don't try to write in a specific genre. I try to put my writing style is very much pantser. I put my characters in situations. I try to have an idea of what their motivations and their backgrounds and the kinds of choices they would make, and then I like to have them tell me what they're going to do. And because of the idea, I wanted to create essentially a hard-boiled detective. Robert B. Parker Spencer's series sort of is a great inspiration for my set of my set of detective novels. That I put them in situations, and a lot of the noir came out, but I don't like focusing on a genre. I don't want to necessarily limit myself. I want to be aware of the tropes so that I can flip them on their heads many a time. And every once in a while, I think you kind of have to do half and half. Sometimes you have to do the tropes so people are like, okay, that's that. And then you have to flip it so that they go, oh, wait, it's not always that. But I like characters. I want to see characters do things. And I want characters to struggle with the challenges that are in front of them. And so that's what I do, is I keep putting challenges in front of my characters, whether it's a love challenge, trying to figure out his love life, or trying to figure out what kind of person they're going to be because they just don't know, or they've had things happen in their lives, or bigger concerns of an international, in one of my epic fantasy series. And I just keep putting challenges in front of my characters and letting them tell me what they want, and what I read will then influence what my characters do. So if I'm writing noir, it's because I'm reading it at that time. So.
Well, I think that goes also to what you're touching on is something that Melanie kind of brought up, which is, do we even have straight noir anymore? I don't even know that we do. This notion of not having a set genre, but kind of mixing a couple together, is really what I think modern literature does. So
I'm not even sure we ever had straight noir, and
That might
the
be
reason
true.
why I say that is because we go back and we look at the Hammett and the Chandlers and the all of those great movies of the 30s and 40s and 50s that sort of define, quote unquote, the genre. And then you go back and look at the academic descriptions, and they're all over the place. These things have to be in there. Well, they're not except here,
Exactly.
and except here.
Right.
But
even
they're-
as you compare them to each other, they don't all fall
Right.
into the same notion.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I would almost say that noir is part of a genre. That it is a genre, but it's
That's
part of
more of an
something
umbrella.
that yeah,
Of
Yeah.
tone and mood.
exactly, that I think we can use for a multitude of genres and a multitude of different types of stories that you want to tell. I mean, I write historical fantasy basically, but on top of that, I'm writing either like an African adventure story, or I'm writing a post-apocalyptic-y kind of craziness, or so there's that whole notion that I don't think we live in a single genre anymore.
Well, another one of my great influences, you talk about the science fiction side of things. Asimov's Robot series is a perfect example of noir fiction to me in many ways, because again, we have the struggle of the loss of robotics, and R. Daniel Olivaw and his character, and that Elijah Bailey collaboration is a brilliant noir setting in so far away from what we have today.
It's very true.
Right. And what about thrillers? How do you work those elements into your stories? They are separate, technically.
Well, for me, it's pace.
Yes, yours is
Like,
based.
I like pace. I've talked about this before, and that's partly because I write for young adults, and I even tend to go towards the younger side of young adult. To me, a fast-paced novel that has that kind of really quick, fast beat where you're almost hearing the exciting music in the background. That's something I very much have taken from thrillers. That notion that there are very few downbeats, and that it has a very much kind of a going up straight towards the climax, and then having a big kind of climactic explosion there at the end. So that's straight thriller. I mean, you can Da Vinci Code to any other thriller you want to pop
Tom
up.
Clancy.
That's
Any of Tom
any
Clancy's.
Tom Clancy novel. Yeah.
Or Clive Cussler. Go ahead.
One of the most fun parts of what I do is to imagine the black moment and put my protagonist, put Jemima in a place where it just looks as though she's going to get killed and she's never going to get out, and then I find a clever way to get her out. That's one of the things that I have the most fun doing.
Okay.
So it's kind of a chase, I suppose, or at least a moment leading up to the black moment, and then I hope a twist.
For me, in the epic fantasy series I'm writing, I'm doing a lot of the thriller kinds of things. I mean, there's chases, there's a big battle at the end, there's all sorts of things going on, and it's growing the interkingdom, international politics, and also viewpoints from small, young girl, and all of these things, trying to put them into exciting situations, and again have them succeed. And interestingly enough, sometimes it doesn't always work the way you intend. At least it didn't for me. There's a scene in one of my novels that I had written a young girl into the novel, sort of expecting her to be in the sequel, the third, part 2 and part 3, as a fairly important character, that she was going to grow into something. And I got myself into a thriller situation at the end, the big battle, and I realized that the way I had structured that battle, she had to die because I had made the bad guy competent enough that he wouldn't miss. And she was just downrange. And there were only two choices, and one of the choices was his target to capture, and one of his choices was this girl. And at the end of it all, in the thriller kind of thing, from my standpoint, I was like, wow, this is way more thrilling. Oh man, I had plans for you. Oh well.
I don't think there's anybody sitting around this table with one into
Yeah, that is something about noir and thrillers. Pretty much somebody has to die in a noir or a thriller.
Yes.
Usually in a noir, it's towards the beginning, and maybe towards the end. Yeah, but in thrillers, it's usually in that ending kind of.
Wallace Stevens said, and I love this quote because I think it really helps all art. Death is the mother of beauty. Without risk of actual death, maybe not death on the George R.R. Martin scale, but without having major characters die, not necessarily routinely, but in situations where they don't, where it's hard to get out, then all of those situations, the Hardy Boy books get boring because they're getting out at the end of their cliffhangers.
Yes.
Yeah, I recently saw the remake of The Magnificent Seven, and going into that, especially since the movie and I knew the basic story of the movie, it was quite possible. I was pretty sure that some of the main characters would live, but it was also quite reasonable that some, even quite a few of them, may die. So there was actual suspense there.
Yeah, they left it. I'm not going to give any spoilers. The movie's out there, but I will say the way they wrote the movie, any of the Magnificent Seven are susceptible to being killed throughout the entire movie. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say who dies, who does not die. I'll leave
They're magnificent.
I'll leave that to the I'll leave it out to the trolls who like to destroy movies for other people.
They're magnificent because the 7 of them with an untrained army defeated the 200 gunmen, but doesn't mean they did so without casualties.
Stranger passing by, go tell the Spartans that here, obedient to our laws, we lie.
Yeah.
I like it.
And on that note, I want to say thank you, Rob, for coming, and
thank you
everyone for listening. Tune in next week for yet another interesting tale of a writing industry. Have a great week writing.
Did you know that Right Pack Radio has an international audience? How would you like to reach that audience in regards to your books, your book services, your author services, or more? Go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com and look under advertising for more information. If you don't have a script, that's not a problem. We will be happy to work with you. Once again, go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com for more information. Have you ever written an audio play? Have you even considered writing one? Visit www.windingtrailsmedia.com because currently we are looking for audio plays to produce. Again, that is www.windingtrailsmedia.com and visit calls for scripts. And while you're at it, please sign up for the newsletter, and you will find that icon at the bottom of every page. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.